afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Jo McAhose, and I am an educational consultant on the Nebraska NeMTSS statewide implementation support team. On behalf of our entire team, we are very excited to have you joining us today for our Nebraska NeMTSS Virtual Summit. We recognize that we are in unprecedented times and that as educators, you are being challenged in ways like never before. It is our hope that the information presented throughout our 6-week summit will provide you with the opportunities to explore resources and information that can guide you in your own mental wellness and ultimately to consider the social, emotional, and behavioral well-being of all of our students and families across Nebraska. Educators, by their very nature, are compassionate and giving people. And generally we hear, the reason I went into education or teaching is to help our youth, to make a difference in the lives of my students and their families. As admirable as this is, sometimes we can feel overwhelmed and fatigued by trying to understand and help with the challenges our students bring with them on a daily basis into our schools and classrooms. And now, considering our current situation with the pandemic and the heightened awareness of social injustice, this can be extremely daunting. It is key for us as the adults to understand and manage our own mental wellness before we can help others around us. Which brings me to our presentation today and the distinct pleasure of introducing our presenter, Javier Castellote, who will be helping us explore compassion fatigue and how to deal with this very real issue in education. Javier is a training specialist at Project Harmony and has been working with families across cultures as well as training professionals and the community at large for the past 11 years. In his role as a training specialist, Javier trains teachers, nurses, child welfare workers, and other professionals about child abuse laws, reporting procedures, and prevention. Javier is a certified Darkness to Light facilitator. And prior to working as a trainer, Javier worked with immigrant and refugee families within Omaha's largest public school system, helping families through the process of acculturation and integration into the community. We are so excited to have Javier with us today to explore this very relevant topic and guide us in some reflection and analysis of our own experiences with compassion fatigue. Our team will be managing the chat and Q&A features and will allow a few minutes toward the end of the presentation to address any questions or comments. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Javier. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Mary Jo. I appreciate that. That was a wonderful introduction. I couldn't have done it better, so thank you so much. You actually saved me some time from all the introductions that I was going to make. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive into the content right now. So yeah, like Mary Jo said, just very quickly, this is a very important topic right now, especially considering all of what's happening right now around us. So taking care of ourselves becomes a survival skill at this point. So let me pull up the PowerPoint over here before I actually get to talking because I am incapable of multitasking. So here we go. All right. And I will ask some questions just to make sure that you're all viewing what I want you to view. So can you see the PowerPoint slide or can you see the PowerPoint slide with notes? If you might, use the chat or somebody pop up and let me know. Let's see. Okay. All right. Perfect. Excellent. Well, so yeah, like Mary Jo said, I am a training specialist. I work for Project Harmony. I've been working for them for close to 5 years now. Prior to that, I worked for Omaha Public Schools as a bilingual liaison serving immigrant and refugee populations. That's sort of what led me to work for Project Harmony. So just to give you a quick gist, we're a child advocacy center located in Omaha, Nebraska, and we basically help law enforcement and child protective services with investigations of allegations of child abuse and neglect. So the reason we developed this training was, of course, because of the nature of our job. We are constantly in high stress situations when we're also talking to children who have experienced a lot of trauma in their lives. And what we have discovered and through research across the nation and the world is that when we are exposed to traumatic experiences from others, that leads us to also be impacted, right? So we have to take care of our mental health and just in general, our overall well-being. So that is why it is important to talk about compassion fatigue and self-care, because it's a very important state of mind. It's a very real situation that happens, and it definitely affects not only our quality, our life quality, our lifestyle quality, but it also affects our performance as, in your case, educators, right, in our work. So I like to share this quote with you. The expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet. So this is very true. And as educators, I imagine that on top of all the responsibilities that you have to provide, your subject, your content for your expertise, right? Be it math or sciences, etc. That on top of that, you're also dealing with human beings who are learning to be collaborative members of society, right? So they experience life as well. They have families, they have lives outside of school. And as such, they bring suffering, and they sometimes share it with you because as educators, they see you as safe adults who they can trust in, so that you can help them, right? So you will, if you haven't, there's a great likelihood that at some point in your career as educators, you might have a child come to you and disclose difficult situations, right? So self-care then becomes your umbrella. So if you want to see it as an analogy, right? We still get somewhat wet because I have not ever been, I've never owned an umbrella that protects me entirely. So I always get a little wet, but it's only a little bit, right? So we are hardwired to feel empathy. So we still allow some of the suffering from others to enter our own lives. But if we have self-care, if we have activities that allow us to decompress and to regulate our emotions a little bit better, then we can continue providing good quality services and good care and good education to the people that we serve. So what we'll do today is basically these three things. We'll define the three elements of professional quality of life. Then you'll work on identifying your own characteristics. I will provide you with some handouts and activities to guide you through the process of identifying your characteristics that contribute to or contribute to compassion fatigue, or provide resilience from compassion fatigue, and create a self-care plan for implementation following the training, right? So right after this training, or when you get home at some point, or tomorrow when you go back to work, if you're already working, I honestly don't know. So, but hopefully you can start implementing this to start taking care of yourself. So we're going to talk basically about your professional quality of life and how compassion satisfaction and compassion fatigue can affect it, can impact your quality of life. But I always tell people that, of course, it's very difficult to separate your working life with your personal life, right? So everything that happens as a result of your job definitely affects your life, your personal life as well. So it's impossible to separate them. But again, we're just going to focus mainly on your professional quality of life. So like you see, that's going to be the overarching concept that includes compassion satisfaction, the positive aspects of your work, and then compassion fatigue, which is the negative aspects of your work. So oftentimes when people think about what compassion fatigue is, they tend to associate it with burnout, typically, right? A lot of the times people fail to recognize that secondary traumatic stress is also a contributing factor for compassion fatigue. So again, compassion fatigue, if you think of it as the greater concept, it includes burnout and secondary trauma. So what is compassion fatigue then? Well, it's the negative aspects of helping or working in a field where you're providing services to other human beings in terms of helping them you not only learn with education, but with socialization, etc. All of these different aspects. These aspects of working in helping systems can relate to providing care to individuals, or again, in your case, educating individuals, to the system itself, the system that you are working within, to the work with your colleagues, and to beliefs about yourself. So that is, especially that last one tends to be a very important concept, is that when we're experiencing compassion fatigue, it definitely can alter how we view ourselves, how we, our self-worth, our self-esteem, all of these things. And if we allow for these negative aspects to impact our lives, then we will see in the long term, we will start seeing some of the consequences that are associated with compassion fatigue. So let's begin by exploring what secondary trauma is. Secondary trauma means that you are not in danger, that you are simply witnessing, that you're simply hearing or reading the stories of someone who has witnessed something traumatic firsthand, right? You are not there. You are just allowing the suffering of someone else through their words, be it verbal or in written form, to affect you, right? To take in some of that pain and to try to experience it, even though you're not directly experiencing it. So yeah, that basically is what secondary trauma is. And what we will find out later on when we start doing some of the activities is that some of the symptoms and signs that you're experiencing secondary trauma are just as equal or as similar as to those that you experience when you actually experience the trauma directly. What is burnout then? Burnout is what results as general occupational stress, right? So it's either your work environment or your workload rather than your exposure to another person's trauma, right? So these are your day-to-day things that you have to do: documentation, recording, lesson plans, meetings, all of these things, the things that you have to repeat over and over again. And when you pair all of those general occupational stress activities or tasks with your exposure to traumatic experiences, then that is what leads you to experience compassion fatigue, right? And compassion fatigue then is that state of mind that comes as a result of experiencing both of these things that I have just mentioned, right? Secondary traumatic stress and burnout. So what I want to hear from you is, I just want to hear what you experience. What are some sources of burnout and secondary traumatic stress that happen in your work? So if you want to use the chat, just type some things. We'll take it from there, and I'll read them and share them with everybody else. Okay, sorry, I had to stop sharing to be able to see the chat here. There we go. Okay, so yeah, let's see. Students' loss of parent. Student sharing something about their family that weighs on me continually. What are other sources of secondary traumatic stress and burnout? So sad for everyone. It seems that everyone is affected. Yeah. I'll encourage some other thoughts. You can think of, I'll give you some examples. When you find out that a student, their parents are getting divorced, that is a source of trauma for a student, and maybe they share it with you and you cannot help but feel the suffering and how this is affecting the child, right? Feel unequipped to guide students, the constant worry about doing what's best for students. A child is sad but unable to communicate why. When students are in an environment conducive to remote learning, yeah, additional paperwork load due to COVID. Oh my gosh, I cannot even imagine. Children being removed from home. Yep, a student shares their parent has gone to jail. Absolutely. All of these are real situations, right? Language and cultural barriers, right? Definitely there's sometimes students that have come from different countries experience discrimination from others. That can be traumatic as well. Social media, yeah, I mean, we have, technology has created such a disruption in our lives that now being bullied, for example, is a 24-hour thing, right? You don't just leave it when you go back home and you leave everything behind. Students come to me who are suicidal, right? Yeah, all of these things, absolutely. Thank you all so much for sharing that. I'm sure that some of you will continue sharing, but I'm going to move on. I just wanted to hear kind of a general overview of the things that you have seen. considering where I work, and considering that teachers are still the #1 reporters of child abuse and neglect, that is oftentimes a source of secondary traumatic stress for teachers, is discovering that a child is being either physically, emotionally, or sexually abused, or is being neglected. That can be a huge source of secondary traumatic stress. Good, thank you. So are there any questions so far with regards to definitions, right? I just want to make sure that we're on the same page and that we will also have enough time to complete all the activities. Any questions with regards to secondary traumatic stress, burnout, or compassion fatigue in general? Oh, you can see my next slide? Okay, sorry. I must have. Thank you so much for telling me, Jane. I appreciate it. I'm going to do a swap in here and see what happens. Is that better? Can you see just the one slide? Thank you. Okay, that's what happens when you stop sharing. Is some weird things happens, and yeah. Okay, so if there are no questions, then let's go ahead and continue with the first activity. So I am again going to stop sharing here for a second just so I can pull up the, I'm going to post on the chat a little link that I have for you to open, just to want to make sure that you have some handouts that we'll use right now. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, so make sure that's a live link. Make sure that you click on it and hopefully it opens. I know sometimes on occasion people have some issues. I don't know how we're gonna troubleshoot that if it happens. If you are having any issues, let me know, and what I'll do is I'll share the document on the screen so that you can all see it. But what I would like to do right now is the following. Let me share the screen again. Okay. And slideshow. Let's go to here. Okay. So what I'd like you to do is look at the first handout on that group of activities, right? And it's a list of signs and symptoms that include physical, psychological, and emotional. I believe I'm not seeing these, and I have a horrible memory. But what I would like you to do is take about 3 to 5 minutes, and I want you to review these signs and symptoms. And I want you to circle the ones that stand out most for you. So maybe the ones that you think you have experienced or that you experience with some frequency. I also want you to make note of the ones that you feel that you sometimes bring home, and the ones that you experience while at work. So I'm going to set up a timer. I'm going to turn off my camera while you work independently. And once I get to the 3-minute mark, I will pop up again and just ask where you're all at, and then we'll have a little bit of discussion maybe through the chat. Okay? Go ahead. Okay, so that was 3 minutes. If you still need some time, please just post it on the chat. Let me know if you still need an extra minute or two. I'm going to wait and see if I get any comments, and then I'll continue. Okay, perfect. So what I want to do right now is kind of go over some of these things, right? Because it's important to realize, like I said earlier, that when we are experiencing compassion fatigue, that some of these signs that are typically related to actually traumatic response, like PTSD sort of situations, that it's important to recognize that we sometimes feel these things as a result of the work that we do and the experiences that we're having when we interact with other individuals, with other students, and with other faculty members or school staff, right? So I would like to know if you are willing to share. You can share these privately. I'm not judging or anything, but I just want to hear from you if you have experienced any of those symptoms, right? Or which ones do you think did you experience the most, right? I will share mine. Typically, when I have been in situations like that, I tend to be very forgetful. I remember that when I was working for the school district, after 5 years, I was getting to a point where I had already experienced some secondary traumatic stress. Then I became, I started using my sick days a lot more. So there was more absenteeism. So that was a behavioral sign. Definitely had some temporary substance abuse issues that I have dealt with. I'm perfectly fine sharing some of my vulnerable moments. And yeah, it's physical symptoms I never had. I was always exhausted, physical exhaustion. I just wanted to sleep all the time. So if anyone is willing to share some of this information, please do so. Just post it on the chat. That way we just, sometimes feel like you're not alone, right? I often have difficulty separating personal, professional. Yep. Insomnia and subsequent exhaustion. Yep. Physical exhaustion, insomnia, headaches, depression, forgetfulness, headaches and exhaustion, impaired ability to make decisions at home. Physical exhaustion, migraines, heightened anxiety, forgetfulness. Michelle, thanks for sharing that one, because I always like to make a point out of that, is that we're working with someone else's children all day. And when we have our own children or our own families to take care of, sometimes that affects our family dynamics, right? We're so anxious, so tired, then the emotional support that our family members also need, we may not be able to provide because we are experiencing some of these things, right? So the whole point of these exercises, again, is just to recognize that we feel these things, right? And that, again, sometimes they are a result of the work that we do. In order for us to create a self-care plan, we need to know what our problems are, right? If we don't identify the issues, if we don't identify the signs, if we're not capable of connecting them to our experiences, then it is harder to develop a self-care plan that will be relevant and meaningful to us. So keep the notes that you made out of this handout, because we will use it later on when we start developing the self-care plan. For now, let's move on. Okay. So what is self-care? And I've already kind of explained a little bit of this, and you probably already knew this. I actually like to say sometimes that this training is full of content that most people already know, but we oftentimes forget. We oftentimes forget to take care of ourselves, which is why it's good to have a constant reminder, right? Someone who comes up and just gives us that friendly reminder, hey, are you taking care of yourself, right? This is why it's important. So self-care is, as you can see on that little animation on the left side of the screen of the slide, is kind of analogous to what happens when we go to an airplane and we're about to travel and the flight attendant is giving their safety protocol, spiel at the beginning of the flight, that if there is a loss of pressure in the cabin, that what we need to do is, if the mask with oxygen drops, that we need to put on the mask in ourselves first before we try to help someone else. This is typically something that happens often when you are traveling with children, and oftentimes flight attendants come to people who have children or are traveling with children, and they ask them if they have any questions, because they want to make sure that they understand how important it is to actually put on the mask on you first before you actually put it on your children. Because as it typically happens when you're a parent, you put your needs after your children, right? And because we feel that is our duty, and it is to support our children, because they're learning to be people. This is all new to them, right? And so we want to make sure that they come first before us. But we need to kind of shift our perspective of some things occasionally, right? Because our needs, if we are not taking care of our needs, if we always put the needs of someone else before ours, then we might be in trouble, because we may not be able to continue helping those individuals, because we will be experiencing a lot of issues, right? Again, some of those physical, behavior, and emotional signs. So I will encourage you to start thinking about self-care not as a selfish act, but actually as the very opposite, is that when you take care of yourself, you are more likely to provide better care to others who are around you. So I really love that first bullet point in here, is that what is self-care? Well, self-care is an essential work survival skill. I actually really think that self-care is a life survival skill. If we are not taking care of our overall well-being, then our suffering, which is, everywhere, right? Because life sometimes feels like it's tragedy after tragedy. If we are not taking care of ourselves by using activities that helps us reduce stress, kind of center us, ground us a little bit, then we expose ourselves, and then we are at greater risk of continuing to suffer and have a view of life that is very pessimistic and that doesn't lead anywhere, right? It just leads to more suffering. So like I said, just briefly there, self-care then is not only a work survival skill, but is the activities that we use in order to reduce that stress and to maintain our short and long-term health and well-being in check, right? So examples of activities that we can do that enhance our long-term health, our long-term well-being, is, for example, having a very nutritious diet, right? Doesn't mean that you have to be these fitness, kind of nutrition, person that's just to the extreme, that always wants to be perfect and only have the best foods. Yeah, it's good to have a wholesome diet, right? But we can occasionally engage and enjoy in other foods that are not necessarily thought as the most nutritious, right? But if we have a consistent diet that is full of wholesome foods, then we are taking care of our long-term health, right? Exercise and sleep are also activities that lead us to have longer-term health and well-being. Short-term activities that we can utilize are, like occasionally when you're having a stressful day, you can take 3 minutes to breathe, right? To breathe intentionally. So those are examples, right? Or again, like I just mentioned, sometimes a nice treat that you give yourself after you've had a long day or a very stressful week. Those things are good, right? So if you go occasionally, you've had just a really, really, really bad day, and you reserve these, you love chocolate shakes, and that is the only thing that will actually uplift you on those days, then that's something that you can do in your short-term, as a short-term activity, right? It's engage or reserve those things that sometimes if you have them consistently or too frequent, they can also damage you. But if you reserve those just for very specific days, then that is a great thing. So those are just some general ideas for now. So self-care, as I've mentioned, I think repeatedly already, is necessary for effectiveness and success in your professional and personal commitments, right? If you are taking care of yourself, you're more likely going to perform your job better. You're more likely going to honor your personal commitments, and you're going to provide support for your family and for those who are around you. So this is what our overall well-being should look like, right? We're taking care of our emotions, we're taking care of our mind, our work, our relationships, our spirit, and our body. If we find a balance within and across all of these different categories, then we are going to be in a very good place, right? Sometimes we focus more on some of these concepts more than others, but when that happens, then we sometimes leave something behind, and it does not complete our overall well-being circle. So we have to find ways to engage in activities that will stimulate all of these concepts, right? So what are you doing for your mind? Are you outside of work? Are you engaging in maybe reading books that are not necessarily related to your profession, right? You're just engaging them because it's stimulating and it challenges your perceptions, right? Things like that. How are you organizing your work? Are you structured? Are you proactive in how you do things? What about your relationships? Have you found good strong connections with other individuals that can help you in a lot of different things, right? They can just be there to cheer you up, whatever, right? What are you doing for your body? Are you engaging in some physical exercise, or are you a person that likes projects and you like to fix things at home? All of these things, right? So when we take care and when we include activities in our life that will add to all of these different overall well-being concepts, then we will be a little bit better. That's the whole point of this. So now I'm going to, again, exit the stop share, and I am going to post a link to another handout that you have already in there, but I have that handout as a fillable form. So this is the self-care inventory. And let me post it on the chat. There you go. Just click on it and you'll be able to fill it up right on your computer. What I want you to do with this handout is, of course, just read it. But I want you to really be honest when you're answering these questions, right? So remember, nobody's going to be seeing these. I may just ask some general questions just to make sure that you understood and just to see your reaction when you were completing these. But as you can see, when you open the handout, you'll have the physical self-care category, psychological, emotional, spiritual, relationship, workplace, all of these different categories that I just mentioned that are part of your overall well-being. So you'll have to rate yourself based on the scale that they're giving you here, from 0 to 3, where 0 is I never do these and 3 is I do these well. And you're going to read all of these different things in each of the categories and rate yourself accordingly. Okay. Once you do that, what I want you to pay attention to is whether, there are areas where you see a lot more zeros and ones. And those areas will probably be the areas that you need to maybe focus your efforts a little bit to try to create your self-care plan to address those very needs. So I am going to give you about, let's say, 7 minutes to complete these. And then we'll get back again on the group and I'll ask some questions just to see what your reactions were, and we'll continue from there. Okay, go ahead. I'm going to start the timer right now, 7 minutes. Let me know if for any reason you cannot open the document, if it's the fillable form is not, if you're not able to fill it up. Otherwise, you can, again, just use a notepad and just kind of go about it that way. Okay, so that was about 7 minutes. It was just a little less than 7 minutes, but hopefully you had enough time to complete these. If you didn't, that's fine. You can always complete it afterwards, but at least you probably have a better idea right now of a lot of these areas that maybe you're doing really well on, or maybe you need a little extra help, right? A little bit more improvement there. So what was that like? If anyone would like to share some comments, I'll just tell you this much, that oftentimes when I ask that question, when I do the training, a lot of people say, "Oh my gosh, I'm so shocked." Like we sometimes feel like maybe we're lacking something, but we sometimes cannot really conceptualize it very well. And so once we see it in written form and we're forced to actually evaluate and reflect upon it and evaluate ourselves, then it can be shocking. And sometimes people say, "Oh my gosh, I'm doing really badly here." And I hope you don't think that way. Don't think about it, you're doing it badly. Think about it, this is where I need some improvement, right? And then there's, always a few minutes from now where you can start changing things, right? That's the best way to think about these in particular. Okay, so my responses would have been much different to this survey in February. Oh yeah, definitely, absolutely. So that's a great point, Angie. This is also something that I recommend that you do, is that you keep these documents because it's good to do this self-care inventory throughout the year. It's not like you do it once and you're good, because situations change. I mean, like February was fine and all of a sudden, boom, pandemic, right? And our whole world is changing. So in life changes constantly, right? So we need to adapt to the times and what we're experiencing. So yeah, good. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. Thank you, Angie, for sharing that. Let's move on to Amanda. maintenance self-care plan, right? So a maintenance self-care plan, which is basically the biggest goal for this training, is that you create a plan that makes yourself a priority, right? So that you can start addressing your own needs so that you can continue providing care and help to others. Think about things that you can incorporate based on your self-care inventory that you need to address, that need to be strengthened up a little bit, and things that you will do consistently and that are relevant to you and that can promote your overall well-being. So these are things that you value. They need to be things that you value and that you need and that you feel that are realistic to your needs, right? So I always make this example because, sometimes people feel, okay, maybe I need to incorporate a little bit more exercise into my life. And maybe you haven't really engaged in a frequent, consistent exercise routine for a couple years, which is fine. There's been periods of my life where I go a year or two without really doing much exercise. So then you decide, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and start running, you hire a personal trainer for a few weeks that starts telling you, okay, you need to start doing some weightlifting like 3 times a week. And then on top of that, you need to start running like 3 miles every other day for the whole week, right? And so you haven't exercised in a couple of weeks. Is that going to be realistic? Is that going to lead you to success, or is that going to set you up for failure? You're probably going to fail because your body needs to adapt to the new stressors, right? So you need to do things gradually in a way that is not going to hurt you, in a way that you will enjoy, and in a way that it will lead you to sustaining that effort and that behavior. Okay, so also on your handouts, the first link that I share with you, you can scroll down or up, on the chat to have access to it, or let me know and I can post it again. There are ideas of activities that you can incorporate in your self-care plan that include times that it will require for you to do that activity, right? So there's things that you can do in 3 minutes, in 5 minutes, etc. So what I want you to do right now is I'm going to post this other link with the self-care plan. You will see as soon as I open it what you need to do, but I will go over it as well, of course. Let's go ahead and open it. And what you will see is a grid, right, where there's about 6 different rectangles or squares, and they basically cover all the different categories of overall well-being. So what I'd like you to do is consider your self-care inventory and consider some activities that you already engage in, or maybe look at the list that you have to get some ideas of things that you would like to incorporate in your life as a way of taking care of yourself. So take about another 7 minutes to complete that. Again, make sure that you're being realistic in the activities that you think you can commit to doing, and then we'll talk about the self-care plan a little bit more in depth, or I'll just ask you some questions about some ideas that you came up or some things that you want to incorporate in your life from now on once we're done. So again, 7 minutes. I'm gonna set up the time right. Actually, let's take 5 minutes because this activity doesn't take that long. Maybe think about 1 or 2 activities per category that you'd like to incorporate. So 5 minutes, and then we'll regroup. All right, so welcome back. Hopefully, again, you had enough time to kind of explore some ideas. Sometimes when you put a lot of thought into it, sometimes that makes it more complicated. Sometimes when you put more thought into it, it makes it better. So if you didn't have enough time to complete it, that's fine. Again, make sure that at some point you really take some time to explore some of these activities, and so that you can try to implement them and put them to work. Any thoughts? Was anyone, is anyone feeling excited about the possibilities of the things that you can do? Did someone find this as an opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to start doing these things that I used to do in the past? If anyone would like to share, I appreciate any comments. Okay, perfect. No problem. That's fine. Again, so hopefully you're thinking about these. And again, the whole point of this self-care plan is that you are committed to following through with it, right? And again, it can be just one little thing that you do every day, then you start kind of doing things in chunks, and then eventually those chunks kind of become greater and bigger, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in a better place. So there is no way that I can get you to believe whether this is true or not. There's only one way in which you can find out and it's by actually implementing and doing the things that you think will help you, right? So I encourage you to do some of these things. For me, I'd like to share the things that I like to do. I practice Brazilian sort of martial art that's called capoeira. That's one of the things that really gets me going. So it includes music and acrobatics and strength stuff, and so it's wonderful. It gets me really going, and it really decompresses me a lot, which is actually what I will be doing tonight because it's been 3 days since I haven't done anything. So mindfulness meditation is also something that I do practice, as well as just breathing exercises. That really, really, really helps me a lot. It grounds me, and so when I'm stressed, I know that it's probably because I need to start doing some of those things as well. And breathing takes you, 3-5 minutes that you just put down some of your work, you have a break, you go and breathe intentionally, deep breathing, and it relaxes you quite a bit, right? So, thanks for Susan. Let's see, when I get to a better place, that is when the follow through is the most important for me. Okay. Okay, so when you get, so I'm not sure if I'm following. Maybe are you saying that when you're stressed is when you are not implementing some of the self-care things and you wait until kind of the hustle kind of calms down a little bit and then you find time to do your activities? That's how I'm understanding, and maybe I'm not. I'm not following very well, but thank you for sharing either way. So again, I encourage you to continue exploring some of these things and find better ways to implement these in your daily life. Remember that consistency is what matters the most, not so much the intensity, right? So when I implement and start to feel better, that is when it is most important for me to continue implementation. Oh yeah, sure, good. Thank you so much for explaining that again, Susan. Yeah, absolutely. It's always hard to get yourself to do the things that you need to do, but once you start doing them, that's when you feel the benefit. Right when you're done, you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, I totally needed this, right? So it's always that little push, that extra motivation that you need in order to get to do things. And I think we all do these, right? We're like, oh my gosh, I'm just so tired. I know that if I do these, that I'm probably going to feel better, but you know what? I'm just too lazy and I don't want to deal with it, right? And so when you have too many days where you kind of approach things with that mentality, that's when things start getting stressful and you start getting tired and you start feeling some of those symptoms as well. So yeah, mindfulness and being present in the moment is important to me, but it takes intentionality. Absolutely. That's the whole thing, is that, you can have people telling you to do all these things, but of course, the only person that can alter the course of things is yourself, right? If you don't intentionally try to do these activities, then they're never going to happen, right? So, and until we can find a way to have a pill that will just make us feel better and take care of all our needs, we need to do the work, right? So thanks for sharing that, Mary Jo and Susan. I appreciate it. So again, actually, this is something I haven't said, but one of the things that has helped me in the past to make sure that I have reminders is I set some alarms on my phone, and I just have a caption that says self-care or whatever activity I'm about to, or that I'm planning on doing that day, and that reminds me that, okay, I need to do this, and that's one. Or I keep my self-care plan in a place where I can see it often, right? So I actually have a note-taking app. I take a picture of my self-care plan, and then I set that with an alarm as well that reminds me every day that this is my plan and that I need to try to follow through as much as possible, right? So I encourage you to do the same, to remind yourself, and eventually you get yourself to moving and doing the things that you need to do. So let's briefly talk about compassion satisfaction. So compassion satisfaction is basically the positive feelings from you doing your job well, how well you interact with your colleagues, with your your administrators, your fellow teachers, how well you can maintain positive relationships with them, even when there's disagreements. Those are incredibly important things. And also feeling that your work makes a difference. Now, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but what you guys do really makes a difference, and I hope that you do realize it. I, for one, and for whatever it's worth, do appreciate the work that educators do. Having been I still teach some college classes occasionally part-time, but having been in a public school, at a high school particularly, that's where I work for in my time at OPS, I know how tough it is. I know how tough it is for teachers to do everything that they do. So please do know and remind yourselves that the work that you do is hard, but absolutely necessary, and that you do make a difference. So what I want you to think about, now we're almost out of time, but this is just for you to think about these so that you can follow your compassion satisfaction. How are your relationships with your coworkers? How are your relationships with your students? What are things that you can do in order to improve those, right? So that you find more satisfaction in the work that you're doing. But also remind yourself, what made you choose the line of work that you're in? What made you choose to become a teacher? Right? And again, just for the lack of time, I'm not going to ask anyone here, but if you want to post something in the chat, maybe we can read it a little bit in just a couple minutes. But I always get a lot of teachers that have that one story about, oh, when I was in so-and-so or whatever grade, I remember this teacher that really helped me through something, right? And it made a huge difference in my life. And that is when I knew that maybe I should pursue a life as a career as an educator. Or whatever story you find, whatever story you have, try to go to the past and try to cling to that story, trying to bring it out to the surface, to your memory, so that you remember why you're doing what you're doing. So, like I said, the work that you do is hard, and it's very much appreciated. But in order for you to continue doing it well, you have to take care of yourself. So please add some of these activities to your daily life, and I guarantee you that when you find some consistency in them, you very gradually will start feeling better, right? And sometimes you won't see it right away. Sometimes it just takes a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, and then you start feeling the benefits. So that is all I have. Are there any questions or anything that you'd like to share at this point? Okay, so if there are no questions, thank you so much for your time. I really hope that you have a great evening. Maybe go and treat yourself to something nice, because I think you've probably been in conferences and workshops and all of these things. So do something that you enjoy and do something that makes you feel well, right? And then tomorrow when you wake up, just remind yourself, hey, I need to take care of myself, and these are some of the things that I want to implement in my life from now on, so I can continue being well, so I can continue doing my job well. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much. Hopefully you can all hear me. For some reason, my video, I can't get it to come back on, but I just wanted to, again, thank you, Javier, for being here with us today and for sharing with us your knowledge, expertise, and experience around understanding compassion fatigue and how to reflect on and manage our symptoms and begin to take steps towards a self-care plan. With that, as we said, our time is ending here together, but we did want to remind you all that our summit sessions are recorded and posted along with the slide presentations on our Nebraska NeMTSS website for future reference. Also, we hope you'll continue to tune in to the next few weeks of presentations that continue through September 17th. So again, thank you all for participating and taking your time to be with us this afternoon, and we wish you all the best as you begin this school year.